trees in them. I made ponds of water for myself from which to irrigate a forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves, and I had homeborn slaves. Well, again, America is into gardening, but they don't really want to be gardeners, you know. In First Things First, Roger Merle tells of a business consultant who decided to landscape his ground. He hired a woman with a doctorate in horticulture, was extremely knowledgeable. Because the business consultant was very busy and traveled a lot, he kept emphasizing to her the need to create his garden in a way that would require little or no maintenance on his part. He insisted on automatic sprinklers, other labor-saving devices. Finally, she stopped and said, there's one thing you need to deal with before you go any further. If there's no gardener, there's no garden. I would love to have a garden myself, you know, but the trouble is busting up the soil, fertilizing, planting things, sounds like too much work to me, okay? Horticulture. And then there's agriculture. And he said, and also I possess flocks and herds and larger than all that proceeded before me in Jerusalem. Well, you know, I'm always telling Ann, man, we need to get a few cows, you know, maybe a horse or two, several goats. The trouble is, livestock has to be fed. It has to be cared for. And when all is said and done, it's not as much fun as it's cracked up to be. Somebody gave me a goat once from church. I had about a week, and he had so much trouble, I give it to my neighbor. Well, then he tried to find meaning in amassing wealth. He said, I collected myself silver and gold and the treasures of kings and providences. Well, you can't turn on your TV without hearing a commercial about how you need to hoard up on silver and gold, you know. Hi, I'm William Devane kind of thing. A Boston Globe article once asked the question, does money change you? And the article said, here in the home of the American dream, most people are convinced that gaining a lot of money would change them. It wouldn't change them, excuse me. It wouldn't change them as who they are as people, but is that true? Well, the article went on to say, as a mounting body of research is showing, wealth can actually change how we think and behave, and not for the better. Rich people have a harder time connecting with others, showing less empathy to the extent of dehumanizing those who are different from them. They are less charitable and generous. They are less likely to help someone in trouble. They are more likely to defend an unfair status quo. If you think you'd behave differently in their place, meanwhile, you're probably wrong. They aren't just inherited traits, but developed ones. Money, in other words, changes who you are. So you might think to yourself, well, I'm not wealthy, I'm barely making a living. Well, I tell you this, you take a trip to Nicaragua and you will discover how much stuff we've all amassed, you know, to help Americans understand poverty in its real sense. I mean, real poverty. Most people think they're in poverty, but they have colored TV sets and cars and microwaves and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, Robert Hellbronner, he's a prominent U.S. economic something. Anyway, here he did a research, and here's what he said we would have to abandon if we were to adopt a true poverty lifestyle, okay, like you find in Nicaragua and other places. And here's what he said. He said, we begin by invading the house of our American family to strip it of its furnitures. Everything goes. Beds, chairs, tables, television set, lamps. He said, we'll leave the family with a few old blankets, a kitchen table, a wooden chair. He said, in relationship to clothes, each member of the family may keep his oldest suit or dress, a shirt or blouse. We will permit a pair of shoes for the head of the family, but none for the wife and children. He said, now we move to the kitchen. The appliances, of course, they've already been taken out, so we turn to the cupboards. The box of matches, they can stay, a small bag of flour, some sugar and salt. A few moldy potatoes already in the garbage can. They have to be thrown away. Well, no, actually, you can take those. I got it wrong. A few of those moldy potatoes that are already in the garbage can, you can rescue them because they'll provide tonight's meal. He said, we'll leave a handful of onions and a dish of dried beans. All the rest we take away. The meat, fresh vegetables, the canned goods, the crackers, the candy. And now we strip the rest of the house. The bathroom is dismantled. The running water is shut off. The electrical wires are taken out. Next, we take away the house, and the family can move into the tool shed. Communications must go next. No more newspapers, magazines, books. Not that they are missed, since we must take away our family's literacy as well. Instead, in our shanty town, we will allow one radio. Now, government services must go. No more postmen, no more firemen. There's a school, but it's 3 miles away, consisting of 2 classrooms. There are, of course, no hospitals or doctors nearby. The nearest clinic is 10 miles away and is attended by a midwife. It can be reached by bicycle, provided that the family has a bicycle, which is unlikely. Finally, money. We will allow our family $5. Well, let's face it. By comparison, we're all wealthy. And we have far more wealth than Solomon ever dreamed of. And frankly, we have stuff Solomon couldn't buy. He couldn't buy a computer or a DVD or whatever. Now, don't get me wrong. All of our privileges come from the Lord Jesus Christ. Let's make it clear. And blessings are something to rejoice in. The trouble is when you trust in wealth. I mean, if God gives you wealth and you use it to glorify Him and to help others, that's a wonderful thing. Nothing wrong with that. Don't let some fool give you a guilt trip because God's blessed you. But if you're trusting in your money, you're going to end up miserable and disappointed, because money, it's a good servant, but it makes a terrible God. Okay? All right, so amassing wealth culture, and then we have an array of music culture. He said, I provide for myself male and female singers. Well, that was his CD and iPod and so forth. This is a generation that we seek to find meaning and purpose in music. I mean, we got Pandora and iPods and iTunes and Spotify, and the beat goes on. According to a recent study by the Kaiser Family Foundations, kids ages 8 to 18 years devote an average of 7 hours and 38 minutes per day to the entertainment media. That's more than 53 hours a week, and because they spend so much of that time doing what researchers call media multitasking, for example, surfing the internet while listening to music, they actually manage to amass a total of 10 hours and 45 minutes worth of media in content in those 7 hours and 38 minutes. Well, really the number one way they say that Americans deal with stress is listening to music. Studies show 52% say that that's how they do deal with stress. I suppose I get more pleasure out of music than most things. I mean, I got to be honest with you, I got an iPod, and when I go to bed at night, I never have been one to sleep very good. Usually I get up and pray and read my Bible, but sometimes I just, put on my iPod and listen to music. If I'm going to mow the yard, which takes a half a day, well, I like to put music on. It's probably making me deaf because I got to have it on so loud to hear it over the mower. But anyway, but listen, I love music as much as the next person, but you know as well as I do, after a while, it gets old, doesn't it? After a while, it's just the same old stuff, same old songs, and you get tired of it. And so the point is, Solomon labored in architecture and horticulture and agriculture and amassing culture and array of music, but all of it left him just as empty as ever. It's just the way it works. The only one who can satisfy folks is God Himself, the one who created us. And He can't do that unless we come to Him through Jesus Christ, because He's a holy God. And a holy God can't compromise His holiness. And when you come to Christ, Jesus took the compounded wrath of God in your place and propitiated or satisfied God's offended character. And that way He can receive you and bless you through Christ. Okay? Rachel Welch said, I thought it was very peculiar that I had acquired everything I wanted as a child. Wealth, fame, accomplishment in my career, had beautiful children, I had a lifestyle. It all seemed terrific, and yet I was totally miserable and unhappy. I found it very frightening that one could acquire all things and still be miserable. And that's the truth, isn't it? Well, let's move on. We got pleasure now through lust. It says, and the pleasures of men, many concubines. Well, Solomon was a Hugh Hefner of his day. He had several hundred wives, 300 concubines, and the Bible makes it clear that all these wives turned his heart against the Lord. 1 Kings 11:3. America is literally a slave to lustful pleasures. I mean, consider this. Every 35 minutes, a porn movie is made. $380 is spent per second on porn. The number of porn sites in 1998 was 71,831. In 2001, it was 311,652, and in 2003, 1.3 million. And of course, in 2020 here, Lord have mercy. Well, ex-porn star Tracy Lords, who got into the adult entertainment business as a 15-year-old, said this, I can tell you from personal experience, I've never met a happy porn star. Lust, it always leaves one unfulfilled and empty. All right, so there's the tiresome search and then the troubling summation. Notice he was recognized, verse 9, then I became great and increased more than all who preceded me in Jerusalem, and all my wisdom remained with me. How many think that if they could just be famous and well-known and important, that somehow they would be happy? Jim Carrey said, I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they dreamed of so they can see that that's not the answer. Okay? Well, he was recognized. Notice he was not restrained. He said, whatever my eyes desired, I didn't keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this is the reward from all my labor. So he sought out every conceivable pleasure. And he was not alone. You look through history. You know, some people seek pleasure in unbelief. Voltaire, who was an infidel, he wrote, I wish I'd never been born. People seek pleasure in pleasure. Lord Byron lived a life of enormous pleasure, and he wrote, the worm and the canker and the grief are mine alone. People seek pleasure in money. Jay Gould, the American millionaire, had plenty of it. When he was dying, he said, I suppose I am the most miserable man on the earth. People seek pleasure in position and fame. Well, Lord Beaconsfield enjoyed more than both of them, and he said, youth is a mistake, manhood is a struggle, old age a regret. People seek pleasure in military glory. Alexander the Great conquered the known world, and having done so, it says he wept because there were no more worlds to conquer. Well, Solomon was not restrained at all. He did everything he possibly wanted to do. You know what? It didn't work. Well, he temporarily rejoiced. It says, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and that was my reward from all my labor. Yeah, there's a brief moment of joy in all of his labor. The problem is it didn't last. That's obvious when he keeps going on talking about how his life is empty and vain. F.W. Woolworth, founder of the Woolworths chain stores, had made one of the largest fortunes in the world by the early 1900s. And a portion of his fortune, more than $50 million, was given to his granddaughter, Barbara Hutton, when she had turned 21 in 1933. Well, although she was one of the richest women in America, Barbara was never able to find any kind of real happiness. She married all kinds of it. It included her husband. One was a prince, one was a count, one was Cary Grant. Hutton spent her life battling drugs and alcohol and dependency and anorexia, and one divorce after another.